Oh, hello everybody. Welcome to another video. Decaf coffee on the go, post gym. Good session in the gym actually. I managed to work up to 262.5 kilos, which is the heaviest deadlift I've done this year. But my body definitely feels it because I'm currently quite low in body weight because obviously getting married in 6 weeks, so trying to look as good as I can for that. But yeah, feel weak as piss at the moment. But yeah, happy to get that. But yeah, having a nice decaf coffee to decompress after the gym. And I thought a good time to talk about some books and what I've been reading this month, because I thought it's the end of April now. We're approaching May, so it's getting pretty much close to the summer, and it definitely feels like it at the moment. Felt very smug going into the shop and buying some sun cream. Didn't stop me burning the other day though. But anyway, I digress. Let's talk about some books. I'm going to talk about the books I've read in April. Do a little bit of a wrap up. I've had a pretty good reading month. I've read 5 books, which is quite good for me. It's been a little bit of a mixed bag though in terms of the enjoyment of them, but I'll talk you through which books they are, and then I'll talk you through what I'm currently reading, of which there is a few, because yeah, I tend to be a bit indecisive when it comes to books, so I end up reading quite a few. So yeah, let's get into this April reading wrap up. So I have a terrible habit of the moment I finish a book, I pretty much instantaneously forget characters' names, and I also am pretty bad at remembering plots. So I read some of these books early in April, so I've had to kind of refresh myself of what I've said about them on my Goodreads. So yeah, let's start off with the first book that I finished in April, and that is Bag of Bones by Stephen King. So out of the 2 Stephen King books that I read in April, Bag of Bones is probably the better of the 2. I'll talk through what the other book is in a moment. I'll give you a very brief synopsis of the book. So it's about a writer called Mike Noonan. There is a Max in the book though, whose wife dies, and he's obviously grieving. He starts to get writer's block. So to try and overcome this, he heads to a remote cabin that he owns called Sarah Laughs. But it turns out this cabin is actually haunted, and he keeps getting strange dreams about someone called Sarah Titwell. While he's sort of there in this cabin and in this town, he meets someone called Mattie, who is a young woman who's got a young daughter called Kyra, and it turns out she is the daughter-in-law to someone called Max DeVore, who is the billionaire owner of pretty much everything in the town. And that's kind of where the story starts, and you start to learn more about Max, but then also how that is connected with Mike, and it looks at sort of generational things that might have gone on in the past, and this Sarah Titwell character, who is an old ghost essentially, starts to try to warn Mike about the generational past. So that's kind of what the book is about. And Jo, who is Mike Noonan's dead wife, she plays a part in trying to warn Mike about that as well. So hopefully I haven't given away too much there. That's kind of the premise of the book. What did I think of it? I remember thinking this one was a little bit of a slow burn. I think you spend maybe 2/3 of the book really kind of just developing the characters and kind of learning about the relationship between Mattie and Max DeVore, and Mike and his wife, and what's going on in the haunted house and things like that. But then there is a really good payoff at the end of the book. So overall, I did enjoy it. I remember at the time finishing the book and actually being a little bit underwhelmed by it, but I think the more I've had time to digest it, I actually think I would rank it higher now than I did when I initially finished it. So the main sort of themes of the book are grief and healing, memory and looking back in the past, and to be honest, justice and revenge. Those are probably the main themes within this book. So one of the main things that I really love about this book, to be honest, is the references that Stephen King makes to the book Rebecca, which is one of my favourite books of all time by Daphne du Maurier, because he mentions Rebecca a lot within that. So Mike Noonan is constantly thinking about Mandalay, which is the mansion within Rebecca. He's thinking of Mrs. Danvers, and he's having like nightmares about Mrs. Danvers, which I think also represents kind of the ghost of Sarah Titwell. There's similarities between Max DeVore and Max de Winter. So Max de Winter's like the main character in Rebecca, and I think at the start you're meant to really not like him, and he's meant to be a really powerful man, and obviously that is represented in Max de Winter. So I really love the fact that Stephen King references Rebecca a lot. Apparently Daphne du Maurier and Rebecca was a big inspiration to Stephen King, and you can definitely see that within this book. So the next Stephen King book that I read in April was Dreamcatcher, and this had the potential to be one of my favourite Stephen King books of all time. I was gripped at the start, so it introduces you to 4 characters who all have a slight telepathic connection after they saved a young lad called Duddits, who has a learning disability from bullies. So from there they had this sort of telepathic connection, and they kind of grow up together, and they end up going to a cabin where they all kind of hang out as a sort of lads' holiday essentially, and they do that every year. It's kind of like a hunting holiday, and it's there that an alien invasion takes place, and from that point on, I steadily lost a little bit of interest. I think it could have been absolutely amazing, but I just couldn't get on board with the way that Stephen King executed this one. So when the alien parasites start taking over, they basically take control of people's minds, and one of the main characters, Jonesy, you kind of see it from his perspective, and this alien parasite names himself Mr. Grey, and you kind of see everything through Mr. Grey's eyes, and I just couldn't really get on board with it. I just didn't really enjoy what I was really reading about. I just felt a little bit disconnected between the characters. The characters all kind of felt a little bit disjointed at this point. And then you're introduced to this colonel who's then trying to like track everyone down to try and kill the virus. But yeah, I was just really sort of losing interest at this point. It really sort of dragged out near the end. And I just feel like Stephen King could have just made it a lot better. There was like a lot of connections between Duddits, and like you realise how powerful Duddits like powers were with the friends and everything. And it is a bit of like a coming of age book. It's about friends, it's about loyalty, which I really liked, but I just felt like the story didn't quite resolve itself as well as I would have liked. So those were the 2 Stephen King books that I read this month. So the next book is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I actually spoke about this in my last video, so I'm not really going to go into too much detail about this one. I did enjoy it, but I did find the characters extremely toxic and problematic, and they were just doing my head in by the end of it. I like the fact it is about sort of human connections and relationships. That bit I did like, but just with the whole gaming stuff, I'm not a gamer myself, so I couldn't really get on board with that kind of stuff within the book, and that features quite a lot within it. But yeah, I like the sort of human connection aspect of it, but that's probably the extent of it. So the next book that I read in April is a book that I was really looking forward to reading, and that is Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk, and I really enjoyed this one. Disclaimer, Fight Club is one of my favourite movies of all time. I did try not to compare the movie to the book, because the book is only 200 pages, whereas obviously the film is 2.5 hours long. So the film, I feel, pads it out a little bit more. It's quite condensed, the book, but within the book there's everything that you kind of want, which is similar to the film. And some of the reasons why I love the film is it's very sort of like trippy and psychedelic almost, and you don't quite have a handle on what's going on, and you definitely feel the same within the book. The plot is quite choppy, so it goes sort of back and forth, and you're not quite sure where you are, and that's basically the whole point of it. So a very quick synopsis of the book for anyone that hasn't read it or hasn't seen the film. It's written in first person by the narrator, who is a character who has insomnia and hates his job, and goes to cancer groups to feed off other people's grief in order to help him sleep. But he meets a character called Tyler Durden, which is one of the other main characters, and they come together to form a fight club, and this slowly progresses and it becomes Project Mayhem, where they're basically trying to disrupt society essentially, and at this point you find out a big twist about who the narrator is, and his connection to Tyler Durden, and I'll kind of leave it there. But yeah, really good book, good twists, but like I said, the film pads it out a little bit more compared to the book. So although I love the book, I have to say I think I probably just prefer the film more. Right, so the final book that I read in April, I don't really even know how to talk about this book, because It's a very confusing book, but I've tried to sort of analyze it and understand it, and I'll do my best to discuss it with you, and that is Transcription by Ben Lerner. So I consumed this book in literally 2 days. It is only 130 pages, and a very brief synopsis of the book. A character goes to meet his mentor, who is a 90-year-old man called Thomas, and he's going to be doing an interview with him. So he's taking his iPhone with him to capture this interview, because this mentor is a man of great intelligence within the arts. On the way to go and interview him, he drops his phone and basically breaks his phone, so he can't use it. So he ends up having a conversation with Thomas, and he wants to interview him, but Thomas is basically doing the interview and talking to him, and this character is basically pretending he is actually filming, even though he knows his phone is broken. And he then basically transcribes this to a magazine, the interview, but it's like his interpretation of what Thomas was saying was slightly changed, and that's kind of the theme of the book. So it's all about interpretation and memory, and how over time things can change, and it's all about individual perspective of things. The idea is that you can talk about things on a human level, and how people can interpret that and then pass that on, and how that message over time can be distorted versus kind of objective reality. So actually filming someone and capturing words and how that is interpreted by other people as well. So it kind of explores that sort of new media and sort of old school communication in terms of just human interaction. So I found that really fascinating, and the second part of the book is where it gets really deep and a little bit confusing, because you're then introduced to Max, who is Thomas's son, and he is also wanting to communicate with Thomas. And there's a lot of kind of tie-ins to the start of the book, a lot of references that are made, and you're kind of thinking, wait, didn't that happen at the beginning of the book and it's now happening now? And that's kind of the idea of the book. So Ben Lerner is basically trying to make you think that you're remembering something from the beginning of the book and remembering it different in the second part of the book, and that's kind of the whole message behind the story. So yeah, a very deep, a very poetic book, which will probably take a little bit of time for me to fully understand it, but my takeaway was essentially it was about communication and how over time that can be perceived differently, and it can be perceived infinitely different by different people. One of the examples is Dresden, which is used frequently in the book, where Thomas talks about Dresden and how that was reported during World War II. So the sort of reporting of the bombing of the city of Dresden, and how it is now perceived years after the World War. So it's almost like how stories get passed on to different people, how things are very slightly distorted and changed to sometimes fit people's own biases, and it kind of makes you think more about news and how things are passed on in news in today's society, and how people are influenced by their own biases, their own thoughts, and how they interpret different communication. So despite the philosophical messaging behind this book, there is genuine human connections within it, specifically father-son connections, and father-son connections where there is a big generational gap, with Thomas being an older chap who doesn't use modern technology and has a very different way to communicate with his son, who relies on things like modern technology to be able to use that as a means to communicate with his father. So it's just really interesting look at sort of modern technology and how that is used to form communication in the modern era, essentially. So there is a lot to sort of unpick with the book. There's a lot of sort of different themes within it, and for what is only 130 pages, I really enjoyed it, and it definitely got me thinking, that's for sure. Okay, so let's go through the books I am currently reading. Okay, so let's get through these fairly quickly, because I tend not to do too much pre-reading in terms of finding out about the plot with books that I read. I like to go in a little bit blind. So there isn't a great deal I know about all of these books, but the first one that I'm going to talk about is a book that I do know quite a bit about because I've seen the film, and that is A Clockwork Orange. So I have spoken about this in a previous video, but yeah, I'm about 40 pages into this one. It is a dystopian, social prophecy, black comedy book, and it's kind of a study on free will. Yeah, the big takeaway that I get from this book is that it's very difficult to read because the language in it is just ridiculous. I think I mentioned in a previous video that a friend of mine that has read this book needed to print out a glossary in order to actually get through the book and understand what they were talking about. So yeah, I haven't actually read this for a couple of weeks. It's kind of been shelved a little bit just because I've got other books that I'm more interested in at the moment. One of which is The Three-Body Problem by Zixin Liu. I think that's how you say his name. This is a Chinese author and it's translated into English. It's part of a trilogy, and I'll be honest with you, I don't really know much about it. All I've heard is very good things on booktube. I know it's a sci-fi book, and I know that they really go into detail on the science within the book, which makes it quite believable. There's a couple of books that I've read which I really enjoyed, which does that as well, and that is Jurassic Park and Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. They really go into intricate detail with the science, and it just makes it more believable. And I find when I can almost imagine that happening in real life, then I can really engage more in the story. When there's a plot where it's just kind of so far-fetched that I can't really visualize it actually happening, then I kind of lose a bit of interest. But yeah, I'm only sort of 30 odd pages into this one. I'm going to try and finish the whole trilogy this year, and I'm actually going to put together a video going through my favourite trilogies of all time, because I've got a few trilogies that I want to get through this year, so I'll do a video sort of ranking my favourite trilogies. So speaking of trilogies, Shift is the second book in the Silo trilogy, and this is set before the first book. So Walt is the first one, where you're introduced to Juliet, who is one of the characters who lives within the silo. This basically introduces why people are in the silos in the first place, and then it's getting to a point in the book now, so I'm actually really far into it, where they're now meeting the characters from Wall. So I'm looking forward to finishing this one and then going on to, I believe the last book is called Dust, where hopefully we're going to wrap everything up in a nice big finale. So again, once I finish that trilogy, I can then put it towards the video where I'm going to be ranking the best trilogies that I've ever read. Obviously, Lord of the Rings is going to be in that. So next up is Hamnet. I'm currently on page 226, and I have been on page 226 for about a week. I just haven't really had the desire to pick this one back up for a little while. It is a good book. I'm finding it interesting, but for whatever reason, I'm just not really in the mood for Shakespeare and sort of an old love story at the moment, so I just haven't really been getting into this one. I say it's a love story, but it's pretty tragic as well. It's quite sad in places, and I guess I just haven't really been in the mood for that. But yeah, once I do get around to finishing this one, I will do a little review of it, because obviously it has been quite a popular book recently. So my final book is the rarest book that I own and the most expensive book that I own, and that is Rage by Stephen King / Richard Bachman. So this is Stephen King writing as his pseudonym Richard Bachman, and this was actually shelved from publication due to its content. So it's to do with a school shooting, I believe, and that's about as much as I know. So obviously it's very politicised, and apart from that, I don't really know what else content-wise why it was actually shelved from publication or why it was taken out of publication. But to be honest with you, that makes me just really curious to read it. I have sort of heard that it's not his best short story. It is only sort of 130 pages, so I'm hoping to read it by the end of next week. But yeah, I'm more intrigued than anything else. I think because it's been taken out of publication, you almost feel like you shouldn't be reading it, which just makes me want to read it even more. So there we go, guys. That is my April reading wrap up. Those are the books that I finished this month, and those are the books that I am currently reading. So before I go, I just wanted to ask you guys a big favour. If you could like the video and subscribe, that would be amazing. And leave a comment down below what you're currently reading and what you're looking forward to reading. All right, guys, take it easy. Happy reading, and I'll see you in the next one.